David Wayne Schroeder was a 45-year-old from Brice Prairie, Wisconsin. He was the father of 3 and a devout Christian. On Saturday, September 22nd, 2012, after acting strangely at a church gathering, David's wife brought him home, then left. When she came home an hour later, David was gone. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. In the histories of all different types of incidents, accidents, and murders, there are landmark cases and discoveries. For example, have you heard of Colin Pitchfork? He is the first killer ever prosecuted using DNA evidence. Did you know that? Have you heard of United Airlines Flight 629 from the year 1955? This was the first airplane ever blown up intentionally in the United States. Jack Gilbert Graham planted the bomb in his mother's suitcase, doing so for the insurance money. Until then, believe it or not, there was no federal law that specifically forbade someone from blowing up a plane. Yes, really. And I know you all know Megan's Law, but did you know that her full name was Megan Kanka, and that her killer confessed to the crime the very next day without much of an investigation being conducted? What I'm saying is there are many murderers convicted with DNA, many flights being hijacked or blown up, many children being abused then killed. But there are only a few of each that have left their mark on their respective categories. Well, with the disappearance of David Schroeder, I think the field of missing persons investigation has just that kind of landmark. But I'm not the ultimate judge. You, the public, are. So I submit this to all of you for your consideration. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linez's website, charleyproject.org. David Schroeder, yes, that's Schroeder, not Schroeder, was a big fella, 6'5", 300 pounds. But people who knew him well will say he was nothing but a big teddy bear. David showed this when he got married and took in his new wife's son as well, becoming a father to the boy. The family got a lot bigger with 2 more sons in the next few years. David was a truck driver, then bus driver, always wanting to be home to sleep in his own bed. However, David had health issues, them being a factor of both his lifestyle and his genetics. Diabetes, high blood pressure, bad cholesterol. He was on medication, but these afflictions were getting worse. In addition, in the days before his disappearance, David stated he wasn't feeling like himself. So, on Saturday, September 22nd, 2012, following several days in which David displayed odd, immature, and downright rude behavior, his family attended a church event. There, David continued his un-David-like behavior, including throwing a soda can that almost hit a child. Immediately, his wife coaxed David to their vehicle and drove him home. His wife left him there, thinking she would take him to the hospital once she returned from going back to the event. An hour later, the family came home to find David not there. The oldest son had come home just 15 minutes after David got dropped off. Yet, the son hadn't seen David. He was never seen again. Searches conducted days later yielded no helpful information. Neighbors hadn't seen David walk off or anybody pull up to the house. In the lead up to this episode, I've been very vocal in that this is an important disappearance from an understanding point of view. Not only can we try to figure out what happened to David, but we can compare his behavior and the facts of his disappearance to others in which the general belief is that the person walked off voluntarily. But that all starts by considering these three questions. Number 1, did a recent change to just one of David's medications cause his radical change in behavior? Number 2, what are we to make of David claiming that on Saturday he had no recollection of what he did the night before? And number 3, could alcohol bottles found hidden in the house days after David's disappearance actually be the main clue in his case? David's disappearance appears to be a voluntary walk-off, yet his family has not closed the door to other possibilities. The guest for this episode is David's wife, Charley Schroeder. Unfound News. Last Friday, in addition to the Toby Anderson episode, on our YouTube channel I released a new Unfound Now concerning the February 2021 disappearance of Cynthia Traore. I hope you've watched it. In some ways, it is like a previous Unfound Now episode, the disappearance of Alan White. Next, Unfound Book Volume 2 of Season 2 is very close to being done. I'm thinking another week. It will contain the following disappearances: Helen Diamond, Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, Lucinda Hewells, Ashley Kohler, Debbie Lowe, Patrick Beavers, and Clinton Nelson. I will, of course, be publicizing it all over the place, so you don't forget. Finally, the newsletter came out June 1st. It was back to its usual length of about 4,000 words. You can also now find the new audio version of the newsletter on the Unfound website, theunfoundpodcast.com, where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Deezer, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us for the Unfound Live Show. All of you can talk with me, and I can answer your questions. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. This week, I need to thank Susie. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. I also need to give a huge shout out to all the people who have monetarily contributed using Super Chat during the live show on Wednesday nights. Thank you for watching, and thank you for donating. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Merchandise, the books at Amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Do not forget the reviews. Shirts at unfound-podcast.myshopify.com. Or you can track down my assistant Heather in the Facebook group. Playing cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/unfound-podcast. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. A note before the interview starts. I would really appreciate it if anyone in the medical fields related to David's ailments and behavior could contact me after listening to this episode. I would like your opinions as to what you think was going on with David that night, then the next day. You can email me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Your identities will be kept a secret. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the wife of David Schroeder, Charley Schroeder. Charley, welcome to Unfound.
Thanks, Ed.
Let's start here as we usually do. Let's talk about your family. You and David have children. How many? Their ages, the things you as a family like to do. How would you describe your family? Let's start there.
Okay. Dave and I have 3 children. Our oldest is Michael, and he is now 28. He has 3 little kids.
Wow.
So I'm a grandma. And then he also is engaged right now and will be getting married next June. So we're excited about that.
Wow.
Our next son is Devin, and he is 22.
Okay.
And living right now in Colorado away from us. So exciting there for him. And then our youngest son is Jacob, and he is forever 13.
Okay. All right. And so you have 3 boys. Wow. Must have been a lot of work, Carla, for you and Dave.
And so much fun, though.
Uh-huh. Did you want a girl and didn't get one, or what happened?
Yes. Every time I thought it was going to be a girl, and it wasn't. So, but I do have a granddaughter, and I always said God knew what he was doing to give me until I was a granddaughter. So,
all right.
The whining is kind of crazy.
Okay. As a family, what did you like to do? Of course, before David disappeared back 2000s into 2010, 2011, what were things that the Schroeder family did? Outings, vacations, things like that?
Yeah, we really like to spend time together. Our kids really never had babysitters because we just always did stuff together. One of the main things we did was definitely church activities and going to church. We like to go camping. We like to watch movies together. We like to go out to eat. Went on some vacations for Jacob's Make-A-Wish, out to Disney, and then we also went out to California to Disneyland as well. Wow. So yeah, it was just fun stuff like that. We would always just spend a lot of time together as a family. And I would also have things that I would do with the boys, and then Dave would have his things that he would do with the boys, like watching wrestling and all that, boy stuff. So.
Okay, not into wrestling.
And that kind of thing.
Carla is not into wrestling. Me either. Okay. No. All Green Bay Packer fans?
Yes, definitely.
Of course. Okay.
Most definitely.
Okay. All right. So sounds like a pretty standard family to me. 3 boys, parents doing regular stuff there. And so let's move on to this. Of course, you've mentioned how old your sons are. And so this is 9 years ago. So the people out there can do the math. They were all 9 years younger when this happened in 2012. So let's move to just talk about David himself. First of all, how did you 2 meet?
We actually met through friends. And so one of my college friends was dating a man, and he happened to live with another person, and that person happened to be my brother-in-law. So it was a college friend, and then her boyfriend had a roommate, and one day Dave was over there and saying he wanted to meet a woman, and so my friend said, I have a perfect person for you to meet.
Wow.
And very strange, because I went over and met him and had a good time, and the rest was history. So
it was strange that you had a good time?
It was strange that I was brave enough to just go over there and meet somebody.
Okay. All right. So somebody hooked you 2 up. And how old were you at the time? What year was this?
That was in 1995.
Okay.
So I was in my 20s. And at the time, I was just going through a divorce. And so it was starting new. I had my son Michael was just turning 2. And so basically, Dave raised him as his son this entire time. So that was really a neat benefit of it as well, was having such a neat bond between the 2 of them as well. So.
Of course. And what year did you 2 get married?
We got married September 14th of 1996.
Okay. And what would you say it was about Dave that instantly, or no, maybe not instantly, but attracted you to him? What were the qualities about him that said, yeah, this is some guy I'd like to spend the rest of my life with?
Dave was just such an easygoing, funny. I mean, he had a good sense of humor, just a loving, caring guy. He just had a real heart of gold. You don't find people that a lot of times men that are so tender and tender-hearted, and he was just a really just solid guy, and and just like I said, he took my son in and just loved him, and never called him a stepson ever, except for one time when he had to clarify because the person knew that he hadn't had a child at the time that they knew each other. But it was just really, really neat. He's just a really down-to-earth Christian man, and good friend to people. Yeah. Very tender, like I said.
Okay. And maybe I should ask you this. Were you surprised that he was a single guy when you met him? That, that you were attracted to him, that he didn't have a girlfriend or something?
Yeah. No, I was. And he was 29 when we got married. And I remember him always saying after 29, he didn't know what was going to happen because he thought he should be married by then. But yeah, I was surprised.
Well, I'm 50, so I don't know what that means. All right. Okay, so he's just a solid guy. You two meet, and a year later, you two get married. You already have a son that you've already talked about, Michael, but then eventually you have Devin, and then you have your youngest son, and we'll talk about him later. But what was David into? What did you find out that, besides his personality, what were his hobbies, and what were the things that continued into your marriage that he liked to do, his education, work, all of those things?
Dave really liked to go fishing a lot. That was his place that he just kind of unwound and regrouped and whatnot, and he just really enjoyed that. Something he always did with his dad, and his dad had passed away recently just before we met, so it was one of those things he liked to carry on. He liked to go camping a lot, just kind of be out in the outdoors, and definitely liked to watch the Packers. That was a big thing, a really big thing for us. And then, just like I said, as the kids got older, they started watching WWE wrestling, and that was a big thing in the house. Too many nights of watching that, for sure. Yeah. But, yeah, he just really enjoyed that kind of thing. He had gone to school to become a CNA at one point, so he worked there initially when we first got married, and then he decided to go into truck driving. So he got a CDL, and he worked locally for a building supply company and delivered building supplies. And then after that, he during 2008, it was just a really horrible time for building industry. Yeah. And so he was laid off at that point. And then he decided to start driving school bus, and just really enjoyed the kids, and the kids just loved him, and he was goofy and whatnot with them, and a lot of good stories about that. So, he was just a really neat guy.
Okay, hard worker. Okay.
Very much.
So when you say he was a truck driver, does that mean that he maybe went out of town for days at a time, or it was mainly just local stuff in Wisconsin?
Yeah. Yep. He basically just did local, and the reason behind that was he just did not want to be away from his family overnight. Of course. And so he was able to find a job locally that he would deliver building supplies, and he really enjoyed that, and could do quite a bit of different kind of trucks and whatnot. So, but yeah, he really enjoyed that.
Okay. Let's move on to this. What kind of father would you say was? Of course, you have your son. You already talked about how David raised him as his own. You have your two other sons. What kind of father would you say he was? Disciplinarian, laid back? Did he show his kids, sons how to throw a baseball? Things. What kind of father was he?
He would definitely have a look that he could give the boys, and they would instantly straighten up. He never really had to raise his voice. Very few times did he have to do that. He was very laid back, but the kids were very well behaved, and he did have a structure that we both followed as far as raising the kids, and extremely loving. I mean, that's the thing that the boys remember the most, is just such great memories of different times with him. Whether it was, come on in and, let's snuggle, or can I sit by you, or, and let's snuggle, or whatever. And just a really amazing guy that way with the kids. Always involved in everything that they were doing. Like he would go outside and play catch with them, or that kind of thing, or just whatever it was. He just liked to be around the kids. He really did. Okay. And our youngest son especially, he was super good at taking care of Jacob and just really loving him. So.
Mm-hmm. What about his friends? Do you have friends like from high school that he got together once in a while, or it's mainly his
Yes.
friends? What kind of friends did he have?
Yeah, he had quite a few good friends from high school, and then he also had one of his best friend was over a lot and very involved in our family as well, and they would go see the Blue Angels every year, or go see the Air Fest that was here in Wisconsin every year, and just absolutely loved that kind of thing, and just spending time together. And he was a big part of our life too, his friend was. But yeah, just lots of different friends that we would have different, spend different times with and stuff like that throughout the years.
Okay. Let's move on to this. And I think these are, some major topics that will come up, that are going to come up during our discussion. And being that, of course, you met him when he was 29, and then he disappeared roughly 17 years later, I guess roughly. And so maybe you saw some of these things as they were happening. So let's first talk about David's health. He was only 45 when he went missing, but being that I'm 50, so I know things to watch out for. But it seems for a 45-year-old, he had quite a few health issues. Do you remember when these first came on with him, or did some of these things already exist when you first met him? What do you remember about these items? Diabetes, blood pressure, etc.
Yeah, he was always more overweight, and I would say probably between 38, 40-ish, he probably started with some more of the issues as far as like his blood pressure was high. But somewhat, able to control it. He ended up getting diabetes, also had the high cholesterol, and then he ended up with the diabetes, and he was on medication for that, and whatnot. So, so those started just coming up, right around, I would say probably closer to 40, and then they just kind of got worse over time.
Would you say that you worried about these issues with him? Did you talk to him about these issues? What did he have to say? Of course, some of these things, they are what they are, but other things can be managed through change of behavior, eating, etc. What would you say those conversations were with him regarding these items?
We would talk about it, and I was always worried he was going to have a heart attack. That was my biggest thing, because his father had and had to have heart surgery, and I was just always real worried about that. And his mom was diabetic as well, and so that was something that I was worried about. He was very much one to brush it off as nothing, not really discuss it with me as much as I was saying that I was more worried about it than he was.
Yeah.
At one point, he did lose, halfway decent amount of weight. That was just before Jacob was born. But then, he gained that all back again. So that part was really hard. He never really talked about it or let me know exactly how serious it was. It was just kind of dismissed.
Would you say that he was, once again, in retrospect, it's easy to talk now, but in retrospect, do you think that maybe he could have taken these things a little more seriously, or was, we as guys, we're not up on our health, I think, as much as women are in general, but you think he could have taken these things a little more seriously?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
100%, yes.
Okay.
And that was, like I said, that was something I was always concerned about, and it was very much dismissed as far as, oh, it's fine. And so, but that was always something that I myself really, especially toward the end, was struggling with.
Right. And we have to remember, David was not a small guy. He was 6'5", correct? He was a big fella.
6'5", 300 pounds.
Big fella. Okay. And as the listeners know, I'm sure a lot of listeners are listening to this, a lot of these things are genetic. I have a guy that I've known for over 20 years who I worked with at Star Trek. When I worked with him 20 years ago, and he must have been 25 at the time, maybe, he already had diabetes, and was having, back then, prick your finger to check your, your blood sugar, etc. So these things sometimes cannot be managed. It's just the way, it is. And now 20 years later, he's having some additional issues, but I don't think it's his fault for anything he's personally done. So we have to remember that. Okay, let's move on to this. Did at one point David have a drinking problem that he eventually, got over or conquered. What can you say about that?
Yeah, just before we met, actually, he had realized that things were getting to be a little bit of a problem with him going out as much as he was. And so he basically went through treatment program at the local hospital and whatnot. And he had gone through that treatment program for alcohol and through their behavioral health type of thing, and did that. And when I met him, he was sober. He was very proud of that he had done this. And so that was before I even met him, that he had gone through that. And so, yeah.
Okay. And over the next, you were married roughly, I guess, 16 years before he went missing. Yep. Any issues ever pop up with drinking in those 16 years that you saw?
There was a wedding one time that he got drunk at. He was happy, though. He was kind of goofy.
Yeah.
But literally, it's like I can think of an incident. If he drank at all, it was always NA beer, non-alcoholic beer, if he did have anything. But other than that, really, it was one wedding that we went to. I think another time he went out with some friends for something, and he got a little drunk then. Other than that, no. I mean, that was just something that he was very strong about.
Okay. 16 years, one incident after he, got, recovered from a problem that he had even before you met him. Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to this. Now, I want to know if we would call this an issue, but something I think major that happened before he went missing is you and he took in a foster child. We're just going to use this young man's first name. In fact, I don't even know if I ever even knew his last name. I don't have it in the notes, but we're not going to say it. But his first name is Robert. What went into that decision to welcome him into your home? Of course, you already have 3 boys in your home to then welcome in a 4th. What was the process of talking about that with David, that decision? Let's talk a little bit about that.
So when I prior to Jacob being born, I was a teacher, and so when Jacob was born with very serious and severe disabilities and health issues, I was not forced, but I had to stay home with him. That was my decision because he required so much care. And so with that then was, just living off a day's income. And so basically I had found out through a friend that you could do adult foster care and basically earn money doing that. They would live in your home, that kind of thing. Yeah. It was a little different because they were adults. They were with disabilities, and I was familiar with that. And so it's something for me that I was like, yeah, I can handle this. I'm home anyway. And so we had another woman that lived with us, and then Robert moved in. And so it was anyone over 18. And so that's how he came to live in the house. He had just graduated. And he basically, what we were going to do was have him for about 4 months, and we were going to teach him how to cook, how to do his laundry, those type of things that he could do independently then on his own eventually. And so that was basically the premise of that.
Okay. And before Robert came to live in your home, why was he a foster child? What, teaching him how to cook and things, were these things that he did not know how to do? He was 18 years old. Did he have, for example, a learning disability or something? What was the reason that he was in this system that you could even, bring him into your home?
Right. So he actually had a learning disability. So at the age of 18, he functioned, I would say, more like a 13, 14-year-old.
Okay.
Behaviorally and emotionally, knowledge, I would even say. And yeah, so he had some issues with that. What happens is if somebody is in the system with a disability at the age of 18, they have to either move out, which a lot of times you have group homes and that type of thing, or you continue to live with your parents if that's something that they choose to do. Or this option was, where he could move in with they're called adult family homes. And so basically that was another option for somebody once they turn 18 with a disability.
Okay. It's a situation where you get to pick the person out, or does this organization or whoever just put that person with you?
They actually, once you say that, you want to have somebody, they find somebody, they go through a different questionnaire and whatnot. But I don't think the whole process was as good as it should be as far as matching someone with a family. But that's, I guess, a lesson learned.
Okay. And you say you had already had a woman in your home already there?
Yes.
And did she continue to be there through the disappearance of David?
No.
All right.
They both ended up being taken out.
All right. So I guess what I'm asking, were Robert and this woman there at the same time?
Yes, they were.
Okay. So you have your 3 kids, and then you have a woman and I don't know her name. I don't think you've ever told me her name, and it's none of my business, but she's there, and then you took in Robert as well.
Yes.
You must have a big house, Carla.
Yes, it was. Okay. It was a 5-bedroom.
Wow.
So yes, it was a big house.
Okay. So when does Robert come to live at your house? And I know I guess it's in August. I don't know if you know the exact date, but sometime in August.
It was the 24th. I think it was like the 24th or 26th. It was the very end of August. So he was literally there for 3 weeks.
Okay. And in those 3 weeks, how would you explain how he was? How did he get along with your other children? How did he get along, most importantly, with David? How would you describe those 3 weeks?
It was definitely the honeymoon phase. He seemed to get along well with my Devin, who was 13 at the time, best, because like I said, that was kind of his mental age.
Yeah.
He seemed to get along best with him. My son that was 19, Michael, at the time, Michael could tell that there was, some discrepancies there as far as his abilities. So, but they all got along good. They liked to go out fishing and whatnot. That was one thing that they would do together. He also liked wrestling, so that was part of it. But then him and Dave got along really good. I think it was Robert definitely really liked Dave. He seemed to look up to him and that type of thing. And Dave was good about that. Just even with my son's other friends, he was just always a really good person for other people coming in. So, everything seemed to be kind of the honeymoon phase. So, at the time.
All right. So you have to remember this is late August, early September of 2012. Robert not have to go to school or anything else, like maybe your middle son?
No, he didn't go to school at all. He was done with that. He would go to work. So then that was something that, he'd be gone and stuff for work. So.
Okay. So he would be gone during the day, but you're still at home, I guess, with your youngest son.
Yep.
And maybe this other woman who was a foster child.
And she would go to work as well. So it was a nice time that we had, I think, overall.
Okay, so everybody's doing their thing. And what would you say, for David in particular, what would you say was a normal day for him? Of course, being a bus driver, what was his usual schedule? Getting up in the morning, going to work, when would he get home? What would you say?
Yeah. I would say he probably got up a little after 5, around 5 or so. And then he would do his first route was with the high school, middle school, and high school kids. And then he would do another route of elementary kids. And then he also had a route that was for preschool. So then that would be the third route he would do. And then he would come home in between time. Or if he had, like, a group of kids had to go to the YMCA to go swimming, he'd drive them there. If there was any field trips, he'd do that. So he wasn't home every day in between, but sometimes he would be. And then he did another route midday that he would take the preschoolers home and then bring another batch back. And then he would be home for maybe an hour or two if he came home. Otherwise, then he would just turn around and do the route going home, and then bring the high schoolers and middle schoolers back first, and then the elementary, and then he'd be home usually about 3:30, 4 o'clock, usually.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of driving every day. That's what bus drivers do. And what time would you say he would usually come home in the midday? You said maybe he had a break. What time would he usually come home? How long would he be home?
He'd come home maybe around lunchtime, and then he would go and stay there until maybe like 2 o'clock. I think he had to get going for the next afternoon out. So there'd be times that he'd come home midday, which was nice. And then, it was just, he really enjoyed it. He had a lot of field trips that he did as well during the days. And at night, sometimes for football games, and he really enjoyed that.
Okay. And how long had he been working for that particular company?
I think that was his second school year. I was starting his second school year, I believe. Okay.
So he's doing that, comes home during the midday, then has to go back out. Sounds fairly common to me. All right, so let's move on to this. We're now going to move up to these days, maybe like the week, right before he disappeared. September 22nd of 2012 was a Saturday. But let's start with this. At some point, once again, not long before he disappeared, maybe the beginning of that week, he said he was not feeling like himself.
Yes.
When did that come up? Was that a surprise to you? Did you maybe notice something before he even said it? What can you tell the listeners about that?
Well, he seemed to be really restless, like he wasn't sleeping at night very well. And then sometimes I would go to bed, and he would still be up watching TV or something. I was like, he had to get up and be going by 5, so it was kind of like, you need to get to sleep. And so there was some of that going on where he just wasn't sleeping well, and he just seemed different. There was an incident where beginning of that week, school had just started, so this was like going into the 3rd full week of school.
Okay.
And so at the beginning of the week, he was trying to figure out, there was something, either a construction or something, in which he had to change the way he picked up some children. So you always try to get it so that the children are on the side of the door. And so limit as many times of going across the street as you can. And so something happened in that area that he had to change his route. And so a lot of parents get very specific about, okay, the child is picked up at 6:42, and they're very specific minute-wise. And, yes, parents do need to get to work as well.
Yeah.
And so there was an incident beginning of that week where he had come at one time the week before, and then he had to change this route. And it was basically up to him to figure out how he was going to do it. And so what ended up happening is he went to get this child, and it was late and whatever, and the parent was just irate that he was late. And what time are you going to pick him up? Is it going to be like this every day kind of thing, and whatnot? And so that kind of started part of the process of him not feeling well, too, because he really prided himself in his job.
Yeah.
And I think just, like I said, he was very tender-hearted, and I think that was just kind of like, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to figure this out. And so I think that kind of came in. And it was not a nice altercation, I don't think, overall. And so I think that just really bothered him.
All right, let's maybe be a little more specific, if you can even say. Of course, September 22nd, 2012 was a Saturday. Would you say this was the preceding Monday, so maybe the 17th, or do you think it was even...
Yes, I would say right around there, yes.
All right, so not even a week...
either that Monday or Tuesday, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, as far as the way you understand it, I realize you are not the bus driver, but the way you understand it when these things happen, is it up to the bus driver to let these people know that the schedule's changed, or shouldn't that be some supervisor's job, or what? The way you look at it, the way you understand it, maybe the way David talked about it, was it actually David's fault, or was this like a paperwork error, or what do you think in retrospect?
Honestly, I think it's something that should have come from the bus company, just saying, hey, with whatever's going on here, we have to, change our route a little bit. The time's going to change, more than coming from Dave, just because then that's more of an executive decision that this is changing and whatnot, and this is what time, And the thing is, anybody who knows anything about driving bus in the start of school is crazy. It's very crazy until you get down to a good routine, especially if there's, something, I think it was road construction or something in that street that he had to go around. And so that alone, takes minutes. And so, and I think that just is something that should have really come from the bus company, just to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is why, be patient. So yeah,
Okay. But you think, in your opinion, David took that pretty hard.
he took it very hard, very
Mm,
hard.
okay. And this was even after, though, you would say he said he started not feeling like himself. For example, not sleeping as well as he should. The not sleeping, once again, and there might have been other things going on, but being that you brought it up, him not sleeping as well as he should was something that started before this incident, the way you
Yes,
remember it? Okay.
yes.
Okay. But other than not picking this particular child up, does it seem like he was doing his job just fine? And this was, I guess what I'm saying is there wasn't something else going on with him, that something medically or something that caused him to forget this child. It was some sort of business paperwork type of thing.
Yes, it was
Okay.
definitely that.
Okay.
And you could just tell the way he was. Like I said, he very much prided himself in his job, and so just having a complaint, I think,
Mm,
bothered him
yeah.
because he really prided himself in how he was doing. And like I said, he really loved the kids, and they
Hmm.
really enjoyed him and stuff like that too. So I think that's more than anything what it was. Just he
Okay.
really prided himself.
Okay. What did the company have to say to Dave once again, once this parent complained, and the way you described it in a previous conversation, this was in a upper class part of town, or it was
Yes, very much
something
so.
like that. We'll just leave it at that. But they complained, and of course, David, I guess, quote unquote, got in trouble for it. What did the company have to say to him about that? Did anybody admit the error? Was all the blame put on Dave?
It basically was talked about that, well, you need to fix this, like you need to get your route down and stick with it. So that's basically how I understood it. Was he needed to figure out what time he was going to do it and which way he was going to do it in order to get the bus on the right side of the road, and that was going to be something that he needed to do because he was the one driving. And so as far as I know, that's where the conversation ended there.
All right, so David got the blame for
Yep.
this.
Yes.
Nobody else, supervisor, nobody else took any blame. It was on Dave.
Nope, it was all on Dave. Yep.
Okay, and this, we're saying that this happened on that Monday.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to this. Was it like Tuesday? Well, we'll get to Wednesday and realize we're going to talk about how he had it, or was given a couple days off. But like the next day, Tuesday, do you think he got it right? On Wednesday, did he get it right? I mean, do we even know that?
I'm not sure exactly if he did. I'm assuming he worked his best to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just something he, like I said, he was told he needed to take care of it. So
Okay.
that's what I know from that.
Okay, and when we talk about him driving a bus, are we talking like a big yellow bus, like everybody understands?
Yes.
Big one, big long one.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
and not
Big long
easy
one.
to maneuver.
No.
All right, especially on the back roads of Wisconsin.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that happened on Monday. Let's move up to this. And this is something that we had talked about, but then just within the last couple days, we straightened some things out. You had gone to your notes and looked back at that time, and I'm glad that we got you kind of went back and checked this out, because I think we have this right now. But
Yep.
that week, so September 17th was a Monday. Was it the next day, the 18th and the 19th? He goes to his doctor's office. My understanding is this is something that was not scheduled. Did you know that he was going, etc.?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. I did not know he was going. So on Wednesday, I had gotten a phone call from the bus company saying, "Is David at home?" And I said, "No, he's at work." And they said, "No, he's not here. He was supposed to go to the school to pick up the preschoolers for the midday route, and he did not show up with the bus." And so I was like, okay. And they said, "Well, if you hear from him, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to send another bus over there to pick the kids up." So within a few minutes, I had tried to call Dave, did not get a response. And I got a phone call from a doctor at the family clinic that he went to. However, his regular doctor takes the day off that he has in the week is a Wednesday. So every Wednesday the doctor's off. And it just happened to be a Wednesday when Dave felt the need. He had to go in and see a doctor. He did not make an appointment. It was regular. It was not a walk-in clinic. It was where he goes to the doctor.
Yeah.
And he just walked in there and asked if he could see somebody. And so there was a female doctor that was able to see him that day. And she had given me a call shortly after this to let me know what the visit was about.
All right, let's go through that a little bit. So on Monday, David misses picking this child up. It doesn't sound to me like it was necessarily his fault, but it doesn't seem like the company saw it that way. But then 2 days later, he then doesn't go to pick these preschool kids up because he decides instead to go to his doctor.
Yes. And I was literally sick at that moment because I'm like, oh, we just went through this other stuff with this other child. And I was like, and now you're not picking them up. What's going to happen? And so...
So what time was this that he went to the doctor? Do you know?
It was mid-morning, I believe.
Okay. So this would have been before he would usually come home for an hour, like you said, at noon. This would have been like 10:30 or something.
Yes.
Okay. And instead of your opinion, did he forget that he had to pick these kids up, or do you think that he blew them off just to go to his doctor's office? Your best guess. Or maybe you talked to him about it afterwards. What was it?
I honestly believe he was feeling so bad that the thought of work was not even in his mind. He just needed to get to the doctor.
Okay. Do you remember that Wednesday morning when he got up? Was it anything unusual about that day that would caused him to go to the doctor that day and not the day before or Monday or the preceding week?
Absolutely not.
Nothing.
No, absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's when I got a phone call then from the doctor, and I was like, what is going on? I mean, literally like sick to my stomach because I really did not know what was going on. Other than, like I said, he was not sleeping as well as he normally did. That's all that there was indication to me. So when he saw the doctor, or when the doctor called me then, she was letting me know that he had come in there, was extremely tearful, was not feeling well. He was so dizzy he could not sit up. Wow. He wanted to lay down. He was not feeling well at all mentally, emotionally, and was just a wreck, she said. And I was like, what? Because it just didn't fit. None of that fit. I mean, I understand, like, maybe when if he was talking to the doctor about stuff that he might have gotten emotional about it, but not to the point that he was dizzy and he couldn't sit up and he was just sobbing, she said.
Wow. Okay. Do you think that she called you, once again, this is not his regular doctor, this was another doctor was there. Do you think that she called you, and we'll get into specifically what happened a little later as far as the drugs and the prescription and all that stuff, but did she call you because she was concerned, or did she call you because David wanted her to call you? Because the way I understand, medical records is, David's records would be private even to his wife, you.
Yes.
So was she breaking any confidences by calling you? How do you look back at that? What'd you think? What do you think?
I like I had said, I had tried calling during that time, so I think at that point, if Dave saw that I was calling, he had asked the doctor to give me a call.
Oh, he did?
I thought,
okay.
Yes. So he had asked me and asked her to give me a call, which I thought was kind of strange because I would have rather heard it from him than a doctor.
I'm sure.
But at the same time, it was good to actually, looking back now, to have gotten a chance to actually talk to her at that point. But yeah, it was very odd. But yeah, she had said that David, and in the notes as well that I received later, did say that Dave had asked her to call me.
Okay. Did she give you her medical opinion on what was going on with Dave?
She just said that he was really mentally distraught and that he really needed to take some time off. And so at that point, she had given him a week off until, to see what he was feeling like. And he was supposed to return to her the next week, next Wednesday.
Okay. So so that Wednesday, once again, he does at least part of his regular route, But then at some point decides he better go to the doctor. He might have done that because he did not think it was safe for him to be driving a bus with kids on it. Very,
Exactly.
very possible. He might have just said, the heck with this. I might hurt somebody in the condition that I'm in. Did he go to the doctor driving the bus or driving his regular car?
His regular car.
Regular car. All right,
Yeah,
so
he had dropped off the bus, where his car was sitting. He went and got into his vehicle and drove.
okay, so I guess the company did not realize that their own bus was sitting in their parking lot that they was supposed to. Okay. All right, so then he goes to the doctor, but I guess the way I understand it, you expect him to be home, and he doesn't come home, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and what do you do?
So I end up sitting there, and I got the phone call from the doctor, and I'm expecting him, he should have been home by now if that's the case. Where is he? So then I got really worried because I'm like, if he's really that mentally, having a break, it almost sounded like, that, where was he? And so at that point, I got into my vehicle and wanted to go find him. And Robert was home that day, and he got in the vehicle with me, and we drove down to his favorite fishing place. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I pulled in and I saw his vehicle, which I was extremely thankful for. Yeah. And he was sitting in the front seat, and he was just sitting there with a very blank look on his face and scary. I started crying. It was not something that you ever want to see, someone so broken. Yeah. And so at that point I said, what's going on? And it took a while for him to get into the vehicle with me. And then at that point I said, we're going to go over and talk to our pastor, because he was somebody that we both really easily confided in. Yeah. And so we drove over to the church at that point and talked to the pastor. And Robert was still with us, and he was just sitting in the vehicle. So,
what is this lake? Where you found him, what is this lake called?
It's called Lake on Alaska, and the area that he would go is Schaefer's Boat Landing, it's called. So it's an area down there, and he loved to go on fishing on the docks there.
When you got there, and of course you talked to him, what did he say back to you? What was the conversation? Of course, Robert's there. Maybe you're going to have to limit your conversation of what you really want to say to each other. But yes. What did David say in this trip from the lake to your pastors?
There wasn't a whole lot of talking at that point, other than he just wasn't feeling good. He really needed, he was crying. And so it was more like, all right, let's just go and talk to the pastor. And like you said, I didn't really want to say a whole lot in front of Robert. Yeah, it wasn't really his place to hear that. So, and we just basically then went and drove over to the church at that point.
I know this would be a technically protected conversation and everything, but can you give us a general idea of what the conversation was like with your pastor? How long was it? What was your pastor's opinion, etc.?
I think we were probably there for close to an hour, and just basically talked about, what had gone on with the bus company and whatnot. And he was just really not feeling himself and whatnot, and just really sad. I mean, it was very sad because he was so broken, just so broken. And I had never in my lifetime seen him to that point. I mean, he was always very sensitive and tenderhearted, but not to the point that he just could not even hardly bring himself and put himself back together. He just really was broken.
Did he give you or the pastor any reasons for feeling like this?
Not really. He didn't really know what was going on, other than he said he wasn't sleeping very well. This incident with the bus company, there was really never anything that I felt was...
Excuse me?
It was nothing that I felt was equivalent to that response that he was making. And I think part of that for myself was just knowing, like with son Jacob, a lot of things that had happened with him in the past. I could see where he would be very broken up over that and what was happening to him. This did not seem to carry that same weight, I guess, in my mind. That I was seeing.
So the way he was acting was much more, let's just say, over the top than you would have thought given the circumstances.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So you're there for an hour. And once again, your pastor, I realize he's probably not a medical professional, but I totally can respect you going to him, to talk, somebody you trust. Did he give you personally, when David wasn't like around, maybe as you were walking out, did he give you any personal guidance on any of this?
Just basically to stick together, like we had in the past with other things, and just do the best we could. And it was a good thing that Dave had some days off, we both felt, and that kind of thing. And so it's like, okay, just another bump in the road.
Okay.
So let's get going again and see what we can do.
All right. So this is Wednesday. So this is the 19th. And so you come home. Please describe the rest of that day. Does his work call to find out what the heck happened to him? And Thursday, does he go into work? I know that what the doctor said, but, did that fly with his company? What goes on for those next, 36 hours from you getting home on that Wednesday?
As far as I understand, he had called and let them know that he was going to be off, and that was approved, because later on it was discussed with some of the staff there that he was off until the next week. So as far as I know, everything was fine with it, and it was good for him just to get some rest. And so he slept a lot and that kind of thing, and just kind of took it easy at home. So
he did not go to work that Thursday, the next day?
No, he did not.
All right. Do you remember that day? What went on? What he did? What you did?
That night, I remember he had taken Devin and Robert out fishing, and they had caught some, and he was teaching them how to fillet.
Huh.
And he had a really nice fillet knife. I remember that. And the kids just thought that was the coolest thing. And he's like, okay. And he was just really teaching them how to do it so there would be no bones. And it was just a really cool moment. I remember them eating the fish, thinking it was the best thing that they had ever tasted because they had helped.
Yeah.
I remember that as just a really neat moment that I wasn't involved in, and I could watch it from the outside going, wow, that's really cool. And so I remember that as a really good moment.
Okay. So then Friday, of course, he still has this he's able to stay at home on that Friday because of what happened on Wednesday. And, what goes on that Friday? And then we'll take it, through entire Friday. But on Friday, what did you two do?
So basically, I always drove Jacob into school because he went to a different one that the bus didn't come out to our house for. And so I would drive him into school. And so we brought him in. And then after that, Fridays were my rummage sale days. So I like to go rummage sailing. And so I'm like, do you want to go with me? He's like, yeah. So we went out rummage sailing, and we had a really super fun day. He seemed to be in a much better mood. And everyone noticed it. It was kind of creepy in the sense that it was almost too good, too fast. But he was in a really good mood that day. And I remember him finding something that he wanted to give to Michael, and just different little things like that. A plaque that he had found with Psalm 46 written on it, and it was just a really nice day.
Did the prior days of Wednesday and any of that come up during that day, or was that something you knew not to bring up because it might just put him back in the mood that he was in?
Right. It wasn't really talked about. We were just kind of working through what was going on and whatnot, and enjoying the time we had together. I remember watching lots of movies with him that day, and then I remember specifically he wanted to watch The Wizard of Oz, which was kind of funny.
Wow.
I mean, just when it's just adults,
okay.
you would think that would be one you'd pick. But yeah, so then it was just that kind of thing, and it was just a really good day. Okay.
So we now move on to Friday evening, and what was supposed to happen? What was the schedule for that evening regarding Robert, Devin, and David?
Okay, so that night the kids were Devin and Robert were going to go to football games, and they're going to go in two different towns, different villages they were going to for the football games. And so Dave went and drove Robert over to where he was going, and then he took Devin over to a different football game, and he came back to the house, and at that point is when we were watching movies and whatnot that night. And we were just sitting on the couch together. I was laying across his lap with my head in his lap, and we were just snuggling on the couch, and I had actually started falling asleep a little bit. And that's when when he had gotten a call from Robert. Robert was ready to be picked up, but he also had said that he had gotten in trouble for buying cigarettes for minors that night.
Oh my.
And so it was okay, now what's going on? And he was going to talk to him about it. And I was like, God darn it. And so at that point, I just went to bed. And Dave left. It was about 9:30. And Dave left to go pick him up, and then was going to pick up Devin next.
Okay. What town was Robert in, and what town was Devin in?
Okay, Robert was in West Salem, and then Devin was in Holman.
Excuse me, say that second one again, please.
Holman.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Holmen. Yep. And that was the school district my children were in.
Okay. And the listeners should know I will be doing a video for of the map of these locations for the disappearance of David Schroeder that will be on the YouTube channel, so people can look at these different locations that we've already talked about, including the lake, and then some locations we'll be talking about before we're done here. Okay, so Robert gets in trouble. Maybe we shouldn't be too surprised by that. Where was your youngest son and, of course, this woman that was also living with you? Were they also there home that night, or were they somewhere else?
So the woman that was living with us went to her parents every weekend for respite, and so she went there, and so she was not at the house. And then Devin was in Holman at the football game there, and while he was there, the game went into overtime, and so obviously that takes a while to finish playing the game. And then Devin had plans to go to a birthday party after, and so that's basically why Robert was being picked up first, because then that would give Devin a good half an hour time to be at the party and whatnot.
What about Jacob? Where was he that night?
Jacob was at the house with us, and at that point he was already in bed.
Okay. Yep. All right. And so would you say that Robert, because of him getting in this trouble, did he call earlier than you thought he would?
Yes, to some extent, yes.
Okay.
And so it was about 9:30, and then basically he told Dave he was ready to go.
Okay, so David gets up and leaves. And so what were you expecting to happen? I guess you've already described it. He was going to go pick Robert up and then go get Devin a little later. Let's just pick out a time, 10:30. And you expect the three of them to be back at your place 11:30, something like that.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's why I went to bed, because there's no reason for me to stay up and wait for any of it. So I honestly, like I said, it was such a great day. The only thing, like I said, was this odd thing that he had gotten into trouble, but Dave was going to handle it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to bed, because like I said, I started falling asleep on the couch. So.
All right. And what was the first alert, kind of the red flag, yellow flag, that maybe those things were not going the way you thought? What was the first sign of that?
I got a call from Devin like 11:30, 11:40, right around in there, saying that Dad was not picking him up, and that his friend had said he could stay overnight at his house. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to stay over here. I was sleeping, and I'm a really weird sleeper. So when someone like that, I can talk on the phone, doesn't mean that, I'm really alert to what's going on. And I remember just thinking, well, if he's going to stay over at his friends, that's fine. So at that point, I guess I wasn't too concerned, and I fell back to sleep. But the next morning, then I remembered the phone call.
Okay. The way you understand it, once again, I realize you were half asleep, and I think we've all been there at one time or another, getting a phone call and you're half asleep and you're talking, but then the next day you don't remember it. Was it your understanding, the way you look at it now, is that Devin was waiting for David to pick him up, and Devin called David, and David said he wasn't going to pick him up, or was it David that called his son Devin and said he wasn't going to pick him up? Which way do you understand that?
From what I understand is that Dave had called Devin and was trying to figure out, where he was at, and at that point, Devin had said, the game's in overtime, so it's going to be a little later. Can I just, but I still have to go to the birthday party, kind of thing like that. And so at that point, Dave was still going to be picking him up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they never got there, Devin tried calling, and he didn't answer his phone. Robert did. And Robert at that point said, Dad's drinking, and you're not getting picked up.
That's what Robert told Devin?
Yes.
Okay. All right, did Devin tell you that specifically on the phone, or did you not find that out till the next day? I know you were half asleep. But...
I found that out the next day. Devin, all he basically said was, Dad's not picking me up, and, so.
Okay, so maybe Devin didn't know whether to believe Robert or not.
Exactly.
Probably, okay. Given Robert's behavior and his emotional level of, okay, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so David doesn't pick Devin up, and of course you get up the next morning, and then things are even weirder. Please explain that morning when you wake up and what goes on.
So that next morning I woke up and I look and Dave's not in bed. And so then I was like, what's going on? And so then I got a little worried about that, and I was like, okay, hold on a second. I think I talked to Devin last night, and I was like, looked at my phone. Sure enough, I had talked to Devin, and I was like, okay, I think he's staying over at his friends. He should be fine, but where's Dave? And so then it's like, got up, looked around the house. He wasn't living in the living room or anywhere else. His vehicle was not there. And so I started trying to call him, and his phone was dead. And so then I, at that point, called Robert, and this was roughly closer to 9 by this point, and called Robert, finally got him to answer his phone, and he said, we're almost home.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, we're driving down the road now. So I said, okay, what's going on? It's like, well, we were just out.
Okay. All night.
Yeah.
All night.
Yep. All
Okay.
night.
And when you say 9, you mean 9 in the morning. 9 in Saturday morning of September 22nd, 2012.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, was Robert telling the truth? Were they right down the road? Did they arrive shortly after that?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
So they were home right around 9, a little after 9, between 9 and 9:30. So at that point I started watching out the window, and sure enough, they came in. And at that point I was like, what is going on? Now you have to remember, he never did anything like this, nor it's one of those things, nor would he. And that's where I was like, okay, now we're doing this again. Like, Wednesday was crazy why he didn't go to work, and now I thought things were good on Friday, and now we're doing this number.
Yeah.
What is this?
All right, so Dave and Robert walk in the house, and what do you say? Of course, Robert, he's not your child. You're responsible for him, but he's 18 years old. What are you gonna do? But David, your husband,
I had to treat him as an adult.
Yeah,
that was the rules. I had to treat him as an adult.
Right, but it's not his car. It's not. It's David who's responsible for him, even though once again they're both adults. Of course, David's your husband. What's David say?
He goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been sitting here all night long, right there on the couch, he says. And I'm going, no, you weren't. And he was so serious. He just kept on saying, I don't know what you're talking about. And he was drunk. He was drunk.
He was.
And yes, and you could tell that he kept on saying that. And I was like, you were not. I watched you walk in this house. He's like, I've been sitting here all night long. He was like adamant about it. And at this point, obviously, Robert went into his room because he didn't want to have to deal with it. And I said, do you realize we could lose our job over this? You took him out.
Yeah.
Overnight.
Yeah, and we're going to get into what they did and everything, and it's not
Yes.
rumors, there's documentation. So,
Hmm.
but you believe that David had been drinking. Did it
Hmm.
seem like Robert had been drinking?
Not that I thought, at least at that point, I didn't see him
Mm-hmm.
enough to really gauge it too much, but it did not appear that he was.
Okay. At any time, once again, I know that you said that Robert went to his room, but at any point did Robert say to David, "What are you talking about? We were out all night and we did this, we did that." Robert never said anything like that to him?
Nope, he didn't want to even talk to me. You could just
Uh,
tell. He was like, I'm getting out of this.
okay. All right, so David is just saying, "Nope, I didn't do any of it. I was not out all night with Robert. I'm not drunk." You didn't want to. Did picking up Devin come up in this conversation?
Yeah, I'm like, what happened to Devin? He's like, oh, I mean, there was no answers. There was no answers to any of it. It was just repeating that he didn't know what I was talking about. He didn't do anything wrong, basically.
So he was kind of trying to claim that he was at home and slept in his own bed or was sitting on the couch all night, and you were the one who was making stuff up.
Yep.
Had he ever done that before in all the years that you'd known him?
Absolutely not. I have no idea who that man was in my house. None.
Okay.
And I will say that to the day I die. I do not know who that was in my house that day.
Okay.
That was not the man that left the night before.
All right, so after a while, I'm guessing you figured out, well, that's his story and he's sticking to it. But you had plans to do something that day, I guess in the afternoon, maybe noon or 1 or something like that. Once you saw that you weren't getting anywhere with that conversation, what happened?
So at that point, I said, we're going to church later, so you better go lay down in bed and rest some and sleep because we're going to be leaving. Because that's just how it was going to be. And I know that might sound extremely whatever on my part, but it was like, I literally was so livid that someone would do something like that and then kind of be like, okay, well, whatever, because we had planned so much for this party. We had 2 churches that had joined together, and so we were having a big party for the community. And it was our first big thing at the church. And like I said, we were very involved in the church, very involved. So for me, it was like, no, we're going. And they had, lots of fun stuff for the kids to do there, and a musician and, bounce houses and jousting ring. And I mean, just tons of stuff, food and games and, everything you can imagine. So it was like a huge carnival, just a big festival. Yeah. And so we were so excited about it, and then I was like, so where did this decision come in from what we were talking about Friday night, I could not even figure that out.
All right, so did he go, like you said, did he take a snooze before you had to leave? Did he take a shower? Anything like that the rest of that morning?
He went and laid down. Yep, he went and laid down, and then about a little after 12:30ish, I went in and said, we're going to get up, because I let him sleep like 3 hours. And so I thought, well, that's a little bit of sleep at least, and said, okay, let's get on our shirt for the church. And he put on the shirt that was for our old church. So right there, I could tell that something wasn't off. It was off, because I was like, I just asked you, no, that's not the church. And so he's like, oh, I said, put on your new shirt for Journey. And so he was like, okay. So he got that on, and we went to the church.
All right. Well, let's fill in maybe some blanks here. Does Devin eventually come home?
Yes. So at some point, I can't remember if I went to get him. I believe that's what it was. And then in between the time when Dave was sleeping and got Devin home, found out what had happened, and he said that, Dad's drinking. You're out of luck, kind of thing. That's how it was to him.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, all right, we'll deal with that later.
Did Devin ever once again, before you went to this church event, did Devin ever specifically ask his dad why he didn't pick him up?
No, he did not. Not that I'm ever aware of.
Okay.
I think he was just really hurt. You could tell.
Yeah.
He was really hurt.
Okay. At any point before going to this event, did Robert ever give you the details of whatever went on the night before? And if he did you even believe him?
Yeah, we kind of talked a little bit. We went fishing, and then and that was basically it. I'm like, something else is not right here.
Mm-hmm.
You could just tell that the whole story was not even relatively coming out.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to go out and hang out for a while, go fishing. Okay, something else happened. But that's basically all I really knew, is that they had gone out fishing.
Okay, so, and we're kind of foreshadowing what we're going to talk about a little later, but no talk of Hooters came up, no talk of going to the bar came up, no talk of going to Walmart came up before this.
Nope, absolutely not.
Okay. So eventually comes the time that all of you are going to pile into your car. I guess it would be Devin, Jacob, you, Robert, and David. That right?
And then Jacob's nurse.
And Jacob's nurse. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you go to this event, and the way there, how was it on the way there, and what happens when you get there?
So on the way there, it seemed to be okay, whatever, and we get there, and Devin wanted to go off and go on all the bounce houses and stuff outside because the whole backyard was full of things to do. So he went off and did that, and we had Jacob and the nurse were there, and then Robert and Dave, and we met up with some friends, and we were all sitting together at the table. And at that point, I was like, it's probably best if I go get his food. So I went and I got his food, which kind of shows he wasn't really able to make that decision. So I went and I got him a brat, and that's good old Wisconsin food here.
Yeah.
Bratwurst and sauerkraut and some chips and a Diet Pepsi. And we sat down and we started eating, and Dave decided that he was going to talk about how we're going to make so much money off of this festival and blah, blah, blah. How much was that you paid for this food? I said, no, it was all free. That's what the church wanted to do. They wanted to invite the community to join in with us. And I said, no, it's really cool. Everything's free and all this entertainment. He goes, oh, no, it's not. I said, yeah, And then he's like, he says, takes his Diet Pepsi and throws it over his shoulder. And to this day, I can see the woman in the window in the kitchen there and the look on her face. And there was a little kid about 8 to 10 years old, a little girl. He missed her head by inches.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have to ask, when you got there, of course there were a lot of people there. Did David interact with anybody else? Did he talk to any guys there? Of course, you're in this church, people know him. Did he interact with any of them before this, you sat down to eat and everything?
No, he did not. And I was so glad he didn't. Because at that point I was like, we ain't talking to nobody. Let's just see what we can do and see what happens with this piece of it. And so that was right after 1 o'clock that we got there. I don't think we were there much more than maybe 40 minutes.
Okay. Did David, once again, I'll ask this, once you started eating, anybody else at the table, anybody who knew David can't come over and say, hey, David, how you doing? Where you been? Anybody, anything?
Nope, nobody else did. The friends that we were sitting with, they were all talking to him and stuff. And the one friend kind of looked at me like, what's going on? I'm like, I'll talk to you later, kind of thing. And yeah. And so, obviously they were aware of the tension.
Okay. What was the final straw that you made the decision, I'm going to have to take David home? What was it, throwing the Diet Pepsi incident, or what was it?
Yes. So once that happened, I was like, oh my gosh. That was so not even relatively like him. And so I said, okay, we're going. I said, you're done. And we got up and started walking and touring. He was like, no, I want to stay. I'm like, no, we're going. I'm sorry, but you just threw a pop can at a kid. Yeah. Almost hit her. And so at that point, we walked out the same way we came in, the side door, and we went out to get back into our vehicle. He did not want to walk. He did not want to stand up. He did not want to do anything. At that point, Robert and the friend that was sitting at the table with us at the time came behind us. and he was pulling me down. I was like so close to falling over. He was being very disruptive, pulling me. I went and I hit him on the hand with my keys. And so he started this whole thing that I was beating him up.
Mm-hmm.
And look what she did. I'm like, yeah. And so that to me has always been something that really hurts my heart.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that type of person.
Right.
But I didn't know what else to do because he's 300 pounds.
That's right.
And he's pulling me down in a parking lot.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
With shorts on. And so, yeah, we then the friend came up and she helped us to the vehicle. And at that point, he was just like, he wanted to sit in the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
To stay away from me.
Okay. And so you get in the front seat, so it's just the two of you now. Jacob, Devin, Jacob's nurse, Robert, they stay at the church event. You take David home.
Yes.
All right, and please, how long is that drive, and what happened during that drive?
So it was about an 8-minute drive, I would say, and the whole time that we were going out, he kept on saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Just turn around right here. Okay, there's a road right there. Turn around. I got to be with Jacob. I got to go back. I want to see him," because one of Jacob's favorite musicians was the one that was singing that day. And so it was a kid's musician that Jacob was like over the moon about. And so he just kept, "I just want to go back." I'm like, "You ruined it. I'm sorry. We're not. Yeah. We're going home. You're going to go to sleep." And I just kept on repeating the same thing. And literally every road, he said, "Oh, just turn around right here."
Mm-hmm. So was he saying it in a mean way, or how would you describe his tone?
It sounded like a little kid. Almost. It was like, "Just right there, just turn around. I want to go back and be with Jacob." It's like, "Oh, you missed the turn," kind of thing. "Okay, no, turn around." I was like, "We're not turning around. You lost your chance. You lost your chance."
Okay. As you are driving and managing what he is saying about wanting to turn around, what is going through your head? Are you thinking that he is drunk? Are you thinking that he's on something? Are you thinking that he's having maybe a stroke or an aneurysm? Something's not right with his mind? Or on the other hand, did it cross your mind that he could have been faking it? What did your instincts tell you of a man that you'd known for or been married to for 16 years?
I was so livid. I was like, "What in the world is..." I had no idea. I was like, obviously I don't know who he was. That was not the man I knew. He acted like he was on something, or I obviously knew he was drunk. And it was just so not him. And so I was like, "What is this?" And I think that's part of, like, even in the beginning when we started telling our story, it's like, I don't want this to be all about alcohol. But the reality is, it was at that point. I mean, what happened? Yeah. But it's like, because that wasn't him. That's all, because I was like, "What is going on? I don't know who you are."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm asking is, when you came home that morning with Robert, you were under the impression that he was drunk. But then these hours later, which around 2:00 that afternoon, so that would be like 5 hours later, were you still under the impression that he was drunk?
Yeah, but then at the same time, it's like, that was really bizarre. And later on, knowing that there really wasn't a lot of alcohol that was drunk because of receipts and whatnot, it's like, that's what made me think, like, something else is going on. He doesn't seem like himself. Like, he just was so out of it. And I didn't know if it was like diabetes, like something with that. And a diabetic attack, yeah. Yeah, it was just so odd. Like, I've never seen anything like that. And other than knowing that I could smell the beer on his breath, I, like, literally had no idea. But then there's, like, a point of me being, like, so angry at the same time to say, what is this? Like, I don't know. I'd be the same way. Like, incredibly sad. I mean, just crying. It's like, Just
I'd
live
been the
it.
same. I think everybody listening to this would have been the same way. If you know somebody for that long, and then just within, of course, it's maybe started at the beginning of that week. That'll be up for the listeners to decide what happened Monday, and then Wednesday, and then Friday night. That'll be all up for the listeners themselves to decide. But some of them maybe have had experiences like you had. But yeah, I think anybody who's known somebody for a long time, and then they suddenly don't act like themselves. I mean, it can be a little scary. And then of course it being your husband, you care about him, of course, very deeply, and you wonder, is this, some serious medical condition that he's suffering?
Exactly.
Okay. So you eventually do get home, and what happens there?
At that point, I had to help him out of the van. He was not able to walk well. We had a ramp for the wheelchair, Jacob's wheelchair, and so at that point we walked up the ramp. I was able to get him in the house, and I said, "You have just absolutely broken my heart. I do not know what's going on." And in the midst of that and him being, "I'm sorry," instantly he snapped from like a sob voice to, "Oh, I have to go to the bathroom." Just like that. That's how his voice sounded, from "I'm so sorry" to, "Oh, I have to go to the bathroom."
Yeah.
And at that point I was like, okay, what's really,
Yeah.
And so he went into the bathroom, which was right off of by the door there, and he went into the bathroom. At that point, I thought, there's no way he's going to try to get into the vehicle and drive back if that's what he's going to think. So I'm going to make sure I grab his keys and take the other set of keys, his spare set that was hanging on the wall. And at that point, I looked at the clock, and it was 2:10 at that point. And I walked out the door.
All right, and where were you going?
I was going back to the church because I had Devin there and Jacob, and the nurse was still there. And at that point, the whole way back, I was thinking, I got to bring him to the hospital.
Yeah.
Because like all of a sudden it's like, what if he's having,
diabetic
stroke? I don't know what that was. And so the whole way back, I'm like, I have to bring him to the hospital. And it's so, like, that's the point to me that was so hard, because I have kids at the other place. I have a child that I obviously has to have my vehicle, and so like trying to figure out for that to bring Jacob home, and so that was the whole thing. So I went there, and the musician was playing and whatnot and singing, and so at that point I had said to the other friend that we had sat by, I had said to her at that point, I'm like, I have to bring Dave to the hospital.
Yeah.
I'm like, can you please come over to the house and come with me? Because I was so scared at that point. And so we finished, just a little bit, got everybody packed up, found Devin, found Robert outside, and then got into the vehicle. And at that point, drove back home.
All right, and so how long would you say? You said you looked at the clock. It was 2:10 when you were leaving to go back to the church. What time did you get back to your house with all of those people?
It was at 3:10. That's what was so weird, because it was exactly an hour.
Exactly an hour. Okay.
Exactly an hour to the minute.
Okay, so you get home expecting, of course, David to be there. But somebody who had come home in the meantime, we haven't talked about him in a while, is one. So you get home, and your oldest son, Michael, is there. Were you expecting him to be there when you got home? Was that a surprise or not?
We expected Michael to be home. He had work that day, and normally he came home at a certain time, and then for some reason he worked overtime for like about 15-20 minutes. The person wasn't there to come in, so he wasn't there right away, so he didn't leave until like 15 minutes later, and so when Michael got home, he just assumed that all of us were at the church doing our thing, and he might come over later or whatever. And so there was really no surprise on his part that he didn't expect anyone to be there. So
okay. Was he aware, being that he was there, was he aware of what had gone on the past week with, Monday and then Wednesday, the doctor, and was he aware of anything that had gone on the night before regarding David not picking Devin up? Was he aware of any of that when you all got home and saw him that Saturday?
No, he wasn't aware of what had happened the night before at all.
Okay.
Or that he hadn't picked up Devin. He was aware that he had the, breakdown or whatever on Wednesday and had gone to the doctor, but that he had been feeling better on Friday. And that's about all he knew.
Okay. So he's there, and I think you told me that Robert ran up ahead to see if David was home, but what'd Michael have to say?
He's like, I don't know, was Dad supposed to be here? And I'm like, yeah, he was here. So what time did you get here? And so the weird thing about it is he had worked overtime, so it was like 2:35, I believe he was there. 2:25, I'm sorry. 2:25 he had got to the house. So we had left at 2:10, and Michael got home at 2:25.
So 15 minutes of time between you leaving and Michael getting home.
Yep, 15 minutes.
And he says when he got home, David wasn't there. I'm guessing all the vehicles you own or whatever were still there when he got home.
Yep.
Okay.
And so it was no surprise he was surprised to think that Dad, was supposed to be there and he wasn't.
I'm sure. Okay, so David's not there. What do you do?
So at that point, we started looking around the house. We went down to the basement and looked to see if he was sleeping down there, and he wasn't. We had a crawl space, looked in there to see if he was in there for some reason. And then the worst part was going out to our shed to see if he had possibly committed suicide.
Yeah. Okay.
And sickening.
Mm-hmm. But no sign of him at all.
None.
How big of a property do you have? A very big one? A small one?
It was almost 3/4 of an acre that we live on. And then there's neighbors are super close. But yeah, there are neighbors around. So that was basic. We didn't have a garage at that time. And so there was, nothing there. But yeah, so we just looked and we didn't see anything. I asked Michael if he had seen him, coming. He said, no, I didn't know nothing. I didn't see anything. So he was totally confused.
Did you go to the neighbors? Of course, this is still the afternoon. It's a Saturday. Most people are going to be home. Did you go knock on your neighbors' doors to say, hey, did David come over here? Did you see him? Did you do anything like that?
No, we didn't do anything like that. Just the neighbors that we had weren't super close to us. I mean, if we saw each other, we'd say hi and talk a little bit, but that wasn't something that really crossed my mind, I guess, at that point. Just because Dave wasn't one that ever really went outside that much in our yard or did not like to go on walks or anything like that. So that part didn't ever really come to my mind. I just assumed he would have been in the house. I mean, that's really where I was at with it. And so at that point, we had called 911 right away and reported him, that there was a missing person.
Right
possibly.
Away.
Yep.
So you get home at 3:10. At what time would you say you called 911?
It was right away because then when they got there was 4:12 is the time that was on the report.
Okay.
So if you think about that, it's all relatively quickly.
Okay. And what do you tell the police? What do they do? Do they go talk to the neighbors? What goes on for the rest of that Saturday, September 22nd of 2012?
Actually, no. Basically, I was told that he had the right to leave. He was an adult. He can do what he wants. This is very common with missing men.
Yeah.
That's kind of the he just went out for a walk. No, he didn't go for a walk. He really did not go for a walk, in my opinion. It's like, no, something's wrong. At that point, they really did not take it that seriously. They had left. I had filled out a missing person report, and then they had left a report for Robert to fill out. And at that point, then they basically left, and I guess he drove around the Brice Prairie area there, and that was it.
Okay.
Seriously.
Okay. When you were looking, of course, you would know your house better than anybody else. Anything missing? Anything left behind of David's?
Yes. His phone he had brought in the house, and it was dead because normally he charged it at night. And so his phone was dead. That was lying there. His keys were there. And his wallet was out in the van. I found that.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
absolutely everything.
And what was it doing in the van?
Everything was in there. Yep, everything was in the wallet. Cash card, driver's license, everything.
Okay. What was the wallet doing in the van?
It was thrown way in the back. So at some point, Robert had made a statement that Dave had thrown the phone and the wallet in the back seat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So he left his cell phone. It was in the house?
Yes.
Did you check it? Did you turn it on, see if you had talked to anybody after you left, text anybody? Did you check that?
Yep. So I checked all that to see. I hit redial, and it was the number I expected to be on there. Mm-hmm. Nothing out of the ordinary. Yeah. Nothing was on there. Nothing. Literally nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
All right. Did you maybe in those next days? Of course, when he didn't come home that day from the doctor, you found him over at this lake. Did you drive over there? Did anybody go over there?
The police did. Mm-hmm. The police did. So we had mentioned that during the report, and then they said they were going to go drive around. And at that point, that's all that happened with the police at that point. And then later on that night, I was just broken up, and I ended up passing out. And so the ambulance had to come out and take me into the bedroom and stuff. And I was just, I guess I was saying he's dead.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. But, and then the police came back at that point and took Robert's statement that he had written.
Okay, and we'll get to that. What about Devin and Michael? You realize Devin's not old enough to drive. Michael is. Do they go out and ride around looking for him? Could they offer up any opinions? Maybe the older son would be better to do that. But offer up any opinions on where he could have gone, where he might have gone?
No, just basically the same things that we said. The other thing is that the police are very adamant about don't going out looking for him. Like, you just sit here and be quiet.
I see. Well, that's constructive.
He has the right to do what he wants. And that has bothered me forever, is that they were just like, sit down, shut up. He's a big adult. He can do what he wants.
Yeah. These people should just keep their mouths shut. I hate it. Mm-hmm. This is common. These people, I can't say it enough. These police officers don't know anything about disappearances. They should just keep their mouths shut. Just take the report. Mm-hmm. All right?
Yes.
Honest to God. Okay.
Instead of making assumptions, right away, and they don't know my husband. They don't know my husband.
Right.
I do.
Right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. Okay. But eventually there were some searches done. I've read and we've talked about that they did bring in some dogs. When was this done? How soon after this?
This was not done. Yeah.
Please.
This was not even done until September 26th.
4 days later.
Yes.
Okay.
So on Sunday, I called and talked to another officer, I believe it was. Monday, I had an officer come over and talk to me because they were going to Ready Bus Line where he worked to go and check if he had shown up for work. And then I was like, is somebody going to do anything? I called every day to see what they were going to do. And then finally, the church put together a search party, and they were going to search on Wednesday, and that's when the detective showed up.
Okay. And
so
what?
They did not take it seriously.
Okay. And but you said on the 26th that there were some searches done in the area. What happened? I realize 4 days later. You should know that sooner than some searches take place. But what went on?
So there was a large group of people from the community, like all people from all around the Crosse area, on Alaska, home everywhere around us. They all came and sent people to come out, whether it was like fire or EMT or whatever. People came from everywhere, and as well as a lot of people that we knew, a lot of people we had no idea who they were. They just came. It was announced over the, I believe it was on the TV or something, but anyway, that they could come and do this. And so all accessible areas were searched by foot. There was cadaver dogs. There was different teams out at that time. At that time, there was also 4 air searches, 2 done by MedLink, and then a civil air patrol, and also the state patrol. They did air searches. There was a water search that was done, and there was also dive and rescue.
And nothing, no signs of him, anything?
None. There was one footprint going into a cornfield, and a man that we knew well, he had been in the service in the war, and he had seen it, and he had the same size foot as Dave, and he really did believe that it could have been him. Other than that, nothing. Mm-hmm. Zero. Nothing.
How far was this this cornfield, this footprint away from your house?
It was a couple miles.
Oh, a couple miles. All right.
Yep, too far.
Okay. I've read the dogs might have, and the listeners already know how I feel about dogs. I do not think they're that reliable, but this information is out there, so I thought I'd ask you about it. Dogs followed a scent to a local, some train tracks that were nearby. What can you tell the listeners about that? How far did they go? Do you know anything?
So that went down, I would say, approximately a half a mile, I would guess, to 3/4 of a mile away from the house is where that was. And at that time, the reason why they were concerned about the train tracks is because Burlington Northern train sits there from 2 o'clock until like 3 o'clock every day. So that was why they were concerned about that.
Yeah.
There was quite a bit of press put out with Burlington Northern, and they literally sent flyers throughout, all the United States in case anyone saw him. Mm-hmm. But I had also checked coroners and that kind of thing throughout, because it went down to into Illinois. Mm-hmm. I think it was Galesburg area.
So what you're saying is they would store one of their trains right on the tracks?
Yes.
How far away from your house?
I would say it was about a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile.
Wow, that is close. Okay.
It is.
Okay. Did David know that?
No, I didn't even know that, quite honestly.
Okay.
And you can see the train tracks. Mm-hmm. The thing is, the embankment up to those train tracks is extremely sloped. Yeah. And so when I tried to go up there myself, I was on my hands and knees, basically crawling up there. It was pretty steep.
All right, we have to remember for David's situation that it seemed to me, or seemed to you, that he couldn't even walk. Mm-hmm. He was trying to drag you down. Okay, so that will have to be figured in there, but start hearing about a train that's parked there for a while, and if we're to believe these dogs, maybe this particular time, maybe he went down there and just happened to see the train and, and jumped on. Okay, we're not going to get into theorizing, though, but that does, of course, catch my ear. I think a little catch the listeners' ears. Now, you told me that although some things were left behind, there was one thing that you discovered that was missing. It was a jacket. What is this jacket?
Yeah, so that was very strange. I never noticed that his jacket wasn't there until one day I walked past. I was like, his coat isn't hanging up here anymore. It was a really thick vinyl work coat. It's the kind of a dark navy blue vinyl on the outside. It has the like a sweatshirt hood on it, and then like an inlay of sweatshirt material. It's very common job, or for work. Yeah. He wore it when he used to work at the building supply place, and so he had his name was on it. It says Dave. That's stitched in, and then he had the name of the company that he did work for, but then he had gotten a Ready Bus Line patch, and the Ready Bus Line patch had been sewn over there so he could use it for his work coat.
Okay, and it was missing.
Yep, and I never found it.
Okay, do you believe it was in your house before he went missing and then missing after he went missing?
Yes, so I believe that when he went to the door, he put on his coat.
Okay. All right, so we get these searches are done. I'll have the searches get done. Nothing is found. No trace of him. And nothing. And of course, he didn't take his phone, so there's no ping information. He didn't take his wallet, so it's going to be hard to understand how he would buy anything. Maybe he took some cash on him. Maybe he had some cash on him. We don't know. But so there's a 15-minute window between you leaving and your oldest son coming home that he could
Yes.
have left. And we have to remember the last time you saw him, he said he was going into the bathroom. So
Yes.
that has to be, we don't know how many minutes he spent in there. So that even reduces it to a shorter time frame, maybe to 12 or 10 minutes. Okay. All right. So let's now discuss in more detail some of these things. Maybe the listeners think that they've heard this night and his bizarre behavior, but they're going to hear a little bit more about this now. And it goes back to that night where he picked Robert up but did not go pick Devin up, and then all of a sudden he's showing up at your house the next morning claiming that he was there the whole time. You've been able to, I guess, between Robert and documentation with video and receipts and everything else, you've been able to figure out, or the police have, and now you know, what they actually did that night. What did you find out? Please explain where they went and what they did when he decided he didn't want to pick Devin up.
So at that point, he basically said, F Devin, and decided that we're going drinking. That's what was said, supposedly by Robert.
Okay.
Robert's account. And at that point, they went to a bar that's just on the road between where the school is and going on to Brice Prairie, where we live. There's a bar there in Midway, and that's where they supposedly started their drinking. I don't know that for a fact other than what he said. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, they went downtown La Crosse. And they went to the Hooters restaurant, and at that point, the last order was being placed into the kitchen because they were getting ready to close. And so Dave got upset that he couldn't have food, and that they had checked Robert's ID. He did not have a driver's license. He had an ID, and that he was too young and that he would not be able to be served. And at that point, Dave threw things at the waitress and the bartender, and they were kicked out. Okay.
So what time? How did you find out about the Hooters? How did that come about?
Hooters was actually talked to, and there was they talked to the manager, and she did remember that whole incident that happened.
All right, so Robert was the one who said they went to Hooters, and then his story was verified.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
So they end up at Hooters, and what approximately what time was this? Did this happen at Hooters? Last serving? How long does Hooters stay open in Crosse, Wisconsin?
Yeah, they until 2 in the morning is bar time, and so and so then it would have been probably closer to midnight. This point maybe that they got, and then so there was the last thing was being and they don't have a Hooters in La Crosse anymore, but there was one at that point. And then at that point, after closing, he wanted to come back there. Okay. And so at that point they came back, and he tried to get into the restaurant because he wanted to talk to them, see the waitress, I don't know, but he tried to get back into the restaurant, and he used his cash card to try to unlock the door. And there was proof of that.
Okay.
On the video.
There was video of him doing this. Have you ever seen that video?
No, I have not.
Okay. But so the Hooters people remember Dave, is what you're saying, because he caused quite a ruckus there around closing time.
Yep. Because they wouldn't serve him food, they wouldn't serve Robert a drink.
Okay. And once again, even though Robert has the mentality, I guess, of a 13-year-old, it seems that this story that he told was true, that they were there.
That one was.
Yeah. Okay. And so he tries to get back into Hooters. Can't get into Hooters. I'm guessing they didn't call the police or anything. But speaking of the police, though, at some point that night, they did get pulled over. This is this is just amazing to me, and this should worry all of us out there who drive on the public roads. But please explain.
So the ticket was given at 2:30 in the morning. So bar time was 2. supposedly they were driving downtown La Crosse, and so there's an area, 3rd Street, which is the big bar area, and there's a lot of one-ways down there. So Dave had told Robert to turn down a street, and it was the wrong way. And so at that point, a police officer pulled them over. And Dave was wanting to get out and fight the police officer, which, once again, is not even relatively him, but that's what was said.
Uh-huh.
And Robert gave the police officer his ID and said that he was a designated driver, and he was giving his friend a ride home. And so at that point, Dave got a citation for not wearing his seatbelt, and Robert was allowed to drive Dave back home, and all he got was a ticket for driving down the wrong way. He did not get a ticket for not having a driver's license. And in the way that, Dave supposedly was being belligerent, I don't understand at all how the police officer allowed that to happen. And he said, when I had questioned him, I did go in later and talk to the police officer over the phone after I got the records. Mm-hmm. And he said, that's not my job. He said, you don't even know how many people are drunk downtown La Crosse at that point of the night.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically was extremely rude to me about it, and did not care that after that incident he was a missing person.
Did Robert reveal this to you? Is this how you found out about this getting pulled over incident? How did you even find out that this getting pulled over happened?
I found out that he got pulled over after I found the tickets in the van.
Wow. Good detective work. Good detective work, Carla.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
So that revealed all of that. So we have going to a bar. We have to remember that Robert's only 18 and David wants to get him drunk. Then they go to a Hooters, and David acts up there, once again being belligerent like he was at the church event just hours later. And once again, he's ticked off about how Robert can't get served. They get taken out. He tries to get back in, try to break into a Hooters, that might be the first time I've ever heard of that. And then as they're driving around, Robert's driving, doesn't have a driver's license, going down the one-way street, gets pulled over, and you've already just talked about that. But then the next thing is they seemingly went to a Walmart, and this is a Walmart that must be open 24/7. What goes on there?
So at Walmart, they needed to get bait because they were going to go fishing. So Robert was going down to get bait. And meanwhile, Dave was needing some Snickers. And so he had found a bag of Snickers and had started opening them up in the middle of one of the aisles, and was also trying to buy beer as well at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so, that's what they decided to do there. And they needed to go fishing and get some bait, and they were going to have their beer and their Snickers and their bait.
Okay. Did both of them go into the Walmart, or just one of them?
Both of them did. And that was also verified by the manager.
Okay. And so from there, I guess they went fishing, which is what they said they were doing when they showed up that morning. Right? All right. Yes. So they had this. So it went from David picking Robert up, then then he was supposed to pick Devin up, to Robert said that David said F the word, F Devin. We're gonna go to the bar. They went to the bar. They went to Hooters, got pulled over, and then went to Walmart, went fishing, and then all those hours later they showed back up at your house, and that's when David said, "I was sitting here all night."
Yes. Yes.
How long was it before you were able to put that all together? Was it in September, October, November? Well, how long did it take?
Oh, it was quite a while, because between I ended up finding the citations in the van, and then just looking through like my bank records and seeing that there was alcohol bought at 5 o'clock, because I guess you can start buying alcohol at 5 o'clock in Wisconsin. That was bought. A 6-pack of Lion and Kugels was bought then. And then finding out from my agency I worked for different things, and as well as from the police.
Okay.
So I was not aware of most of this until that point.
All right. So would you say it took a month to figure this?
Yeah.
All right. So it was quite a
close
while.
to a month.
Okay. So if everyone was wondering what did go on that previous night, to which David said nothing happened, this is everything that went on, and there is documentation for all of it. This is not just some crazy story from Robert. I have to tell you, Carla, that if we didn't have this documentation and Robert just said this all happened and there was no proof, I would think he was lying. You know,
I would 100% believe he's lying. He's had lots of run-ins. Well, as a juvenile, he had numerous run-ins. I found this out later with the police. I was not told that before having this person brought into the home. I was not told that. And since then has an incredibly long record. In fact, right now has some charges of domestic abuse and whatnot against him.
Robert does 9 years later.
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to him a little bit later, but I just want anybody who thinks, well, Robert's telling these stories and he's not very reliable, and I have to admit that there was a part of me that kind of felt that way at the beginning. The fact is that there's documentation for all of this to show all these things that went on this night, even though they don't seem believable, they are. Let's move on to this, that doctor's visit. Now, you'd originally told me one thing, but when you went back and checked your notes, it was something totally different. Yes. We'll go back to that doctor's visit. We have to remember, he said, well before September 17th, wasn't feeling like himself, he wasn't sleeping well, things going on. And so he shows up at the doctor. It's not his regular doctor. This is a different doctor, the one that ended up calling you that Wednesday. What prescriptions was he given? What prescriptions was he taken off that Wednesday, even though that was not his regular doctor? What have you learned about that?
Yeah, so I was looking through records and found out that he actually had been on Prozac, and at that point the doctor said it must not be working. And so the doctor took him off of the Prozac and gave him trazodone for sleep, and then put him on Wellbutrin or Buspirone, I think it's called, something like that. And so, she went and changed his meds. And I don't really think that should have even remotely been done.
Okay.
You don't take someone just off meds without weaning them off.
Okay, and some questions, though. Were you aware that he was taking Prozac?
Yes, I was aware that he was on some form of an antidepressant.
Okay, and how long do you believe at the time of his disappearance that he had been on that? Best guess.
The record said 2 years.
Okay.
So, I remember him being put on something.
Do you remember what the situation was that he was put on this 2 years before that? Because I have to admit that you've portrayed him as being a guy who maybe didn't need that, but he obviously was on it for 2 years. Do you remember the circumstances under which he was given it?
It's very more than likely that it was a matter of just the continued stress of having Jacob's issues that he had and whatnot. He had so many surgeries and whatnot, and I'm guessing it does wear on you over time. And so I'm assuming that's, what happened, because I know he's on, antidepressant as well. I mean, I am as well. So it's something that just, happens a lot of times when you have these issues.
Okay. So approximately 2 years. So let's going back to 2010. And then all of a sudden he shows up at his doctor's office. He says he's not feeling like himself. And all of a sudden this doctor, who's not his usual doctor, just takes him off the Prozac. Granted, it's just a few days before he went missing, but just cold turkey.
Exactly.
Okay. And these drugs that he was given, I don't think they're as maybe commonly known as Prozac, but what are they supposed to do?
Wellbutrin is an antidepressant as well, just a different kind. And then the trazodone was for sleep, so that he could actually get some sleep. He told the doctor he was missing a lot of sleep.
Okay. Did you know if he had ever taken those drugs before, or had you ever heard of them before? Did you ever know that he was taking them before?
No, that was the first time he had been taking those two that got switched on him, but I didn't know what they both were. Yes.
Okay. Once David went missing, of course, this might have occurred to you, thinking back to that day regarding him going to the doctor, and of course him saying that he wasn't feeling like himself. Have you ever had a chance to talk to that doctor or his regular doctor about him going missing and his behavior that night before he went missing? Have they ever offered up to you their professional opinion?
Yeah, I've talked to his regular doctor since then, and he informed me at that point just how bad his diabetes was. I didn't find that out until afterwards either. Dave had not shared that with me.
How bad was it?
He was actually on the highest dose of 3 medications, diabetic medications. He should have been on insulin. His A1C was horrific. Being on medication, you're supposed to be under, usually around 6, under 7 for sure, but right around 6 is high. And then he's on 3 medications, the highest dose of each, and his A1C was 9.5 and up to 10.2. So that was totally uncontrolled.
Mm-hmm. And so, what was it? I don't know what that number is, but did they give you an idea of what his blood sugar was? I realize that's supposed to be like under 110 or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you even know?
His blood sugars were in the 160 up to in the 200s, and that was with medication.
Wow.
So yeah, he was really off. He was on the highest 2 or 3 different pills as well for his blood pressure, and his cholesterol was just a normal dose. That wasn't as bad. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so on all of them, he was basically on the highest dose he could have been on.
Would you say that in retrospect he was withholding some of this information from you?
Oh, 100%, yes. I know that there was a concern at one point. I said, you should probably be going on insulin. And he says, well, then I will probably lose my CDL. And so his license for driving, and that's what his concern was, and that was the farthest that conversation went. Okay.
The doctors, though, can they explain his change in behavior? The way it was, the way he went from, not feeling like himself to being good with you on that Friday to just totally going off the deep end that Friday night into Saturday. Any professional opinion of any of those drugs that could have caused it, or his diabetes could have caused it? Have they ever given their opinion on that?
No, they've never given the opinion on that, really. I don't think that sometimes doctors don't really want to say too much. That was my impression that I got.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the hard part. It's like, well, what do you think it is? And there really wasn't too much other than the knowledge to say he should have been on insulin as high as, everything was. But he did not. He had refused it because he didn't want to lose his license.
Okay. Being that you got to talk to his regular doctor, did the regular doctor agree with the other doctor of taking him off the Prozac and putting him on this other medication? Just, with the snap.
That was not discussed either. I mean, there was no, that's the thing. I said, well, why did she did this. She would switch. And there's always that kind of, I don't want to really say anything bad about my colleague. That was the feeling I got.
Once again, that's nice. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. Because I think the listeners are going to see it. Maybe, I don't know, causation and correlation. I don't know. But, this happens. And then a few days later, he's acting like he's never had before. Granted, it seems like he had some things maybe going on for a little while, wasn't feeling like himself. But, he makes his doctor's visit. And 2 days later, he's picking his son up and trying to break into a Hooters.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay. Exactly. All right. And I'm sure there are some medical professionals. I know we have several in the audience. In fact, as you know, I've talked to one of them. However, it was under different circumstances. We kind of got the Prozac information kind of switched around.
Yes.
But there's several medical professionals in the audience, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say, because they will not be afraid. They will not be protecting any colleagues, because
Yes.
a lot of the audience wants to help, especially if they're knowledgeable on a particular topic. Let's move on to this. His work. Of course, we remember that Monday, due to a paperwork snafu, is what I would call it. He didn't pick up this child. He got in trouble for that. In addition, that Wednesday blew off picking some kids up to go to the doctor, but in retrospect, that might have been a good choice. I mean, the last thing you would have wanted is him acting like he did on Friday night while in a bus with kids. That could have been a national news story with serious consequences. Okay, what about his work? He goes missing. How do they react to it? Is there any idea that maybe because of these two incidents happening in the same week, they could have been fired? What can you say about that?
I have not ever heard that he was fired or anything. However, that Monday when the police officer stopped by there, the co-workers just said, well, no, he's not supposed to be here until when, he's having off at least through Wednesday. That's all they said. And then at some point when I realized the coat was missing, I had gone over there to see if maybe he had left it at the office. And so, because with September being kind of crazy with weather, starts out cold and then gets warmer, I thought maybe it was there. And so I stopped over there, and nobody wanted to talk to me. I mean, it was very strange. I was like, okay. And I have never to this day heard from them at all. I mean, there was nothing.
Nobody ever checked in to see if David was ever found?
Nope.
Nothing.
No, it was very, very weird feeling like they didn't want to talk to me, and yeah.
Okay. Did they give you his last check?
Yes, that was deposited.
Okay. Never checked in you, and in the last 9 years, you've never heard from them again?
Never.
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 Okay. All right. So, but I think that, I can be open to the idea he had these two things happen, and that would have been another stressor on him, thinking, am I going to get fired? And he has these health issues. Am I going to be able to get hired somewhere else? Obviously, that would certainly be something any parent would be concerned about. Okay.
And I know that his doctor as well, his primary doctor, had told him at his last visit that, you do need to be on insulin, and it's probably time to start looking for another job if that's the case. And so I know that was discussed.
Okay. I'm going to ask you this again, even though I asked you this before, but I want to make sure that I ask you this. When Devin did come home that Saturday, did he ever confront his father about not picking him up the night before?
No, he never did.
Didn't come up on the way to the church event? Nothing like that?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I think he was just really hurt by it.
Yeah. Okay. Being that you said that you've spoken to your doctor, but in the last 9 years, have you ever had a chance to speak to any other professionals, health professionals, maybe particularly in the area of mental health, regarding David's behavior? Those last 5 days, in particular that night into that Saturday. Any of them ever given you any suggestions and theories about what he could have been going through that night? Being that his doctor didn't want to speak ill of himself or his colleague or whatever else, have you ever tried to talk to somebody else who never looked at David for an opinion?
Yeah, and there's times that I would either say something or someone would come up to me that heard the story. It was more my consensus, I would say, is other people were always worried about the diabetes part of it. Was there something that happened with that? Mm-hmm. And that was always something.
Well, I realize everybody has an opinion. The ones I care about are people who deal, with mental health. Once again,
right.
In your travels, of course, you're around, being that you had a son with special needs, being around medical professionals. Did it ever come up? Somebody who knew that David disappeared, and you just thought, David did these weird things before he went missing. What do you think? I'm just asking you, in the last 9 years, has anybody ever given you an opinion
No,
that
not
you
really.
believe?
No, nothing
Okay.
that's a definite. All that's ever been saying is, well, he was diabetic, though, right? That kind of thing. But nothing that, and I wish there was. I wish I could understand it, because I don't.
Yeah.
And there's been nothing that's ever been given.
Okay. Let's move on to this, and this is something that you told me in a prior conversation, kind of late in the conversation, is that after he went missing, your sons ended up finding alcohol bottles hidden in the house. When did this start happening? How many were there? How were they found?
This was found out from the boys, I think it was probably that Sunday or Monday. I'm thinking it was Monday of that week, that following, like he went missing on Saturday. They had been downstairs and they were looking around to see if they could find out anything. And they found some hard alcohol bottles behind the couch downstairs that he had hidden. And there was 3 of them, I believe. And it was hard liquor.
Were they empty or half full, or what were they?
Yeah, they had definitely been drunk. At least I would say maybe a quarter of a bottle to half a bottle left in each of them.
Okay, so when you say hard liquor, you mean like Jack Daniels, stuff like that?
Yes.
I'm not a drinker, so I'm just gonna say the popular ones. Jim Beam, the whiskey, thing, like that.
Like a whiskey. I think there's a whiskey, and I believe there was some sort of vodka. Yeah.
Did that surprise you?
That was absolutely beyond surprising, because like I said, he had not anything. I mean, there was, like I said, a wedding, or just something that he had a little to drink, but I didn't. I mean, to have him drink hard liquor, absolutely not.
Okay.
No, that was beyond shocking.
Okay. Any idea now that you know this, now that we found this out, shortly after he went missing? Any idea that you've ever been able to, as to how long you'd been doing this before he went missing? Being that you thought he wasn't drinking at all, and then you find this. Now, in retrospect, could you say, what? Any proof that he'd been drinking a year before he went missing, or anything at all?
No, I wouldn't say it was anything like that. It was if any time, it was probably within the weeks prior to that, possibly when he was having the issue sleeping and that type of thing. I know that within those few weeks prior, there was times, like I had said, he would be, watching TV and I would go to bed, that kind of thing. So that's the only thing that, in my mind, he would have had the time to do it, or those would have been the opportunities.
Okay, so this was a surprise. So we add this on top of everything else that, he has these health issues. You find these bottles that you believe were recently, put there, that something that he was doing recently, and let's just say the days and weeks before he went missing. He has these health issues. He has a change in medication. He has these job issues going on. A lot of things going on. Let's now talk a little bit, go back to Robert. He, of course, was the one who eventually started talking about what went on the night before, and it seems that his story checked out. But he did not stay with you very much longer after that. Why was that? Was it due to David disappearing? What was the reason?
Yeah, so on Dave went missing Saturday, so that Monday I had tried calling to let the agency know what had happened, because that was my responsibility. And so I tried calling, and they were all in service. And so I left a message for them to call me back. And then on Tuesday, I had talked to them and whatever, and let them know that this incident had happened and that David was missing. And so at that point, I didn't know about the Hooters or anything like that. I just know that he had gone out fishing all night. And so that's all I knew at that point. And so I had told them that. And then at that point, they said that they were going to come over. And they came over and took Robert out of the house. And the mother to the other girl came and took her out of the house.
Just because David went missing?
Because he went missing. That's all I knew at that time. And then when I started calling more about it and found out, I went into the office because I was really upset that they took him out of the house. I was told by a main supervisor that there had been, in the second time when Robert had filled out his report and gave it to the police officer when they came back when I had passed out.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, the police officer had taken the statement, and Robert had said that at one point he had hit his head on the window because Dave grabbed the steering wheel. And so they were saying that he had bodily harm. So Dave was being charged with bodily harm. And then also Robert claimed that Dave had exposed himself to him and made sexual comments. And so they were charging him with lewd and lascivious behavior. So he had 2 charges against him, none of which was proven, because if that really happened with the van, you'd think I would have seen something on the van. And there was nothing, no damage.
Right.
And Dave was not the type of person that I know of to have done anything.
I agree with you. I do not for one second believe that David did anything to Robert, since Robert is, as we now know, is a known liar. Of course, but we do know that he did tell the truth about the things that weren't where they went that night. Unfortunately, in David's position, he might, who knows what he might have done. I'm not saying he molested Robert. Maybe he went to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Out in the street somewhere, and Robert. Was standing there, and then Robert...
That's what it was. It was an exposure.
Right.
That's what was said.
Right, yeah.
And so that's the thing that gets me, is because there's no proof that really happened. And Dave didn't even like the boys walking around in the house in their underwear, because he's like, that's not appropriate. You need to go get dressed. Yeah. I mean, that's how he was very modest. And that's, just all this. If you knew Dave at all, that was so taboo, and it's like, you just don't do that. And that's where... And the thing is, this story did not come up on the report until the police came over the second time.
Right. So Robert, although it seems he told the truth about that night, we're going to choose not to believe him regarding this other stuff. But he was taken out of there. This other woman was taken out. And so it ended up going back to just you, Jacob, Devin, and Michael.
Yes. And the charges were dropped.
Okay.
They were taken off record. I did have that taken care of, because they were like, there's no proof that this happened.
Okay.
So that was taken off record.
Now, you've already talked about this, but you said in the last 9 years, Robert has been in and out of jail. Bad guy.
Pretty much a month. Between drugs and battery and abuse and bail jumping and whatever else. Yes, he's been very busy. Okay.
Did you ever run into him, any contact with him after he got taken out of your house?
Probably the first week or two, and then absolutely not. There was, so he was taken out on Tuesday, and then he came to the search on Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay.
Yes.
But we must be clear about this. Robert was at the church event with all those other people. He was with your one son, or both your sons were there. The nurse was there, all these people. So, although I think under some circumstances, I think Robert might make a good suspect in this for some reason. Being that he has not led a very good life, we should know that he was far away at the church event, and David was at home by himself. Now, I do have to ask you this. The fact is, over the last 9 years, people have been suspicious of you regarding your own husband's disappearance. Let's just talk about that. Let's just be very transparent about that. When did that start? How did it start? Did the police ever questioned you? Is that really what happened when you dropped your husband off? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, as far as the police go, they came in and did a search of the house, and they checked around the washing machine and dryer and stuff for blood evidence. That type of thing was done. As far as, checking out the house, I let them in. There's nothing to be, concerned about there. And so there wasn't a lot of, they would ask me what happened and whatnot, but nothing really suspicious that way. But people talk, and that's a big part of it. I know the whole community there was a lot of rumors that I had killed him and put him in a freezer downstairs.
All 6'5", 300 pounds of them.
Yeah, 300 pounds, 6'5", in the middle of the afternoon. Within a couple seconds, I chopped up a whole body and stuck it in the freezer. That was not downstairs. I didn't have a freezer downstairs, but that's what the community was saying. Yeah. And, you know, different things about warrants out for my arrest. And I said, the police know where I live.
Yeah.
So, but that's the problem when it comes to this, is that there has to be some talk. There has to be some gossip. There has to be that going on as well.
Right. It should be known you do not live in the house where he disappeared from, correct? You've moved?
Yes, I have moved.
Okay. We've talked about this, and like I said, we do not do theorizing on the program, but the neighbors obviously have been questioned by somebody. Nobody saw anything. Nobody saw him that day.
No.
All right.
Nobody did. And that's my only concern with some of that. I know the neighbor across the street had just left as well, so he wasn't home. And the lady that was on the other side of the street, she wasn't there. Her husband was. And then I don't know about the other families, but there really wasn't a lot of that either, from what I understand. Like if someone wasn't there, they didn't go back and check. But there was literally nobody saw anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know the community. I've never been there. You lived there for many years before you moved. Is it possible? And once again, we're not trying to theorize, but just to throw, I think most people are going to think that he walked off, but just to say, is it possible that somebody could have pulled up to your house, picked David up, and left without anybody seeing? Is that possible in your community, in your neighborhood?
Very. Oh, yeah. That, honestly, that's my feeling always has been, that he got picked up. Because the way he was, I don't see him walking very far at all. Mm-hmm. It's just from what I know of him. And that's the thing I just have always wondered, because of how the road is, it goes straight down. And so, you know, so it's like there's one way off of the prairie, basically. So nobody saw him. My son didn't see him.
Okay. All right. But we have to remember, as far as cell phone, you checked it. He didn't call anybody, didn't text anybody.
Nope.
All right.
Nothing.
Okay. Now, you've kind of alluded to this in one way or the other, but this is not the only tragedy that you've suffered in the last 10 years, him going missing, but you did lose your son Jacob in 2015.
Yes, we did.
He succumbed to the disease that he had since he was born?
Yes. So Jacob was born with spina bifida, which is a hole in the neural tube in his back. And so he had a hole there. His back did not close. And then as well, he had hydrocephalus, which is the fluid on the brain. And so he ended up having a shunt surgery and to help with the flow of the brain, spinal fluid in his brain. And so the first one didn't work. They did a second one. And a week after that, Jacob's ventricles in his brain ruptured, and he was instantly brain dead.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So that's been incredibly hard.
Yeah. How old was he?
Hard. Jacob was 13 years, 3 months, and 13 days. He liked the number 3. He was my third son.
Yeah.
He died 3 years after Dave went missing, and he just did everything in threes. Amazing kid. He also had severe brain damage, which was not ever seen with them. So, yeah, it's been tough. Yeah. Been very tough.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a Facebook page or anything set up for David's disappearance?
I do not, and the reason why I do not is I had started some.
Yeah.
And there's just way too much talk, and
yeah.
I honestly, with having Jacob and knowing that there's when you have a child like that, you become very strong, and I do not have room in my life for stupidity, and I do not have room in my life for people who need to talk about things in front of me, behind my back, or whatever, when they don't know the truth. And so I don't have place for that. And so because I've chosen not to go into that with people. I have chosen to rise above that. I've risen above that, and that is why I've chosen not to do that. I am very tender-hearted as well, and so when people are saying things about you and whatnot, it makes it very hard.
It hurts.
So I decided personally that's what I was going to do.
It hurts, yeah.
It hurts very much, more than anyone can imagine.
How have your other sons, Michael and Devin, handled the last 9 years?
It's been incredibly hard. I lost my job, obviously. They got taken out 2 days later. So with that, not able to work, with having Jacob at home, with that came a lot of PTSD, obviously, after Dave's disappearance and not knowing what's going on, and then these severe issues that I had with Jacob, and he ended up dying. And so it's been tough. It's been incredibly hard. My oldest son, Michael, stepped in and helped take over some bills, and working together and whatnot to make our life good. And so I'm very grateful to have a son like that, who's just willing to give without wondering what he's getting back. Right. And so he's just been amazing. And my son Devin lives in Colorado, and he's doing his thing, and I'm very happy for that. 13 is a horrible age to lose your dad. Right. And on his 14th birthday, they did a search, and Devin went out for the search on his 14th birthday. Wow. And so he's had a hard time with that, and finding right now is what he's kind of doing. And so it's hard. It's very hard. They were extremely close to their dad, extremely close. So that part of it's always going to be hard. Within a month after Dave went missing, we found out that Michael was going to be a dad, and so the first grandson was born right after. And so that was an interesting process. And so we have Zayden, and then we have Anastasia, who was born 3 days after Jacob died, and again the 3, and then my youngest Ezra, and he just turned 4. So our life has continued on, and we've seen amazing things happen. And so life can be very good, but it's something that this is never going to go away. There's a lot of things that people don't always understand about missing.
Right. I got it. I hear you. I do this for a living. This is all I do. I've done interviews like this for 4.5 years, but I've never had anything like this happen in my life, into my family or friends. So I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. I try to identify with it as much as I can, but I know that I can never feel, like you do. You're the one who's been affected. I'm just here to, myself, my assistants, the audience, we're just here to help out as much as we can. But I surely do not know what it's like, to be in your shoes. And I totally believe it when you say it's been very difficult. No doubt about it. Because I've done too many interviews like this to think otherwise. Very, very difficult. And not knowing, etc., is horrible.
Exactly.
Any final words before we complete this interview, Carla?
I just want to encourage anyone, if they know anything, if they saw anything, if they've heard anything in the past, and thought, even though it might seem like it's insignificant, it could be something. Did you see Dave down fishing? Or, anything. And just if there's anything you can give, definitely step forward. There's somebody has to know something. Yeah. There has to be something. And so I just really encourage anyone, if they have any, information that they like to share, please do.
Carla, I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And that was my May 25th, 2021 interview with Charley Schroeder, wife of David Schroeder. I thank her for joining me and all of you on the program. Something that did not get mentioned in the interview, and the topic doesn't get included very much in these episodes because it's very rare, But Carla had David declared deceased a year and a half after his disappearance. This was for purposes of getting Social Security and other benefits and aid to help with the caring of their youngest son, who eventually passed away in 2015. Something else that we did not cover until after was David's side of the family. How did they react to his disappearance? Once I heard Carla's answer, I figured out why she had never brought them up. David's father died in 1995 due to a road accident in which he was the only death. David's brother is not the greatest of people and never had much contact with David or Carla. Carla did eventually reach him after David's disappearance, but the brother seemed unfazed by the whole situation. David's mother, she only lived 8 minutes away. She was alive at the time. There was the thought that maybe David had walked to her house. His mother wasn't reached, though, until the next day, that Sunday. She said she hadn't seen David since September 2nd. Carla thought that was about correct. And the mother's response was, "Well, I hope you find him." And that was it. She took part in no searches or anything else. And when Carla arranged for David's balloon release in 2013, the mother showed up, then left as if she was just a casual observer to the entire proceeding. So that is David's side of the family. Also, as I mentioned in the interview, there is now a map analysis video on the Unfound Podcast Channel on YouTube, where I show you many of the locations discussed with Carla. To understand why I think this disappearance is so important, we must imagine a scenario where David didn't have to pick up 2 kids that night, but only one. And on the way to pick up that one, something in his mind changed. So David would have been alone. Under that theoretical scenario, are we still sure David would have come home? Maybe he would have chosen then to drive off, instead of walking off the next day like he most likely did. But had he driven off in this theoretical scenario, and David and his car were still missing 9 years later, what would we be saying? He must have gotten jumped. He must have gotten carjacked due to his big heart. He must have pulled over to the side of the road that Friday night to help a fellow motorist. And it was a scam. They took David and his car. We, myself included, would come up with all sorts of theories in which foul play was the only one considered. Right? We'd think his car got chopped up or driven into a lake with him in it. In addition, maybe in our think tank, we might consider the Esther Westenbarger scenario, in which David lost control of his car, maybe from one of his health issues, drove into a lake or pond, and just hadn't been found yet. Why would we think this? Because David was perfectly fine when he left the house. Yes, we would talk about his recent job problems, but given that he was the David that Carla knew for 16 years when he left, not to mention the great day that they had that Friday, we would think David got attacked or David drove into a lake. Yet we know in the real scenario, because he came home, that this is not what happened. Because he was home alone. There were no signs of foul play. He did not drive a car away from his house. The neighbors didn't see or hear anything. Why did David's behavior change? I don't know. That's why I announced before the interview started that I want professional medical opinions on this. Any mental health experts, pharmacists, addiction counselors. I want you to contact me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. I want your best diagnosis, even though I know you didn't know David. I'd also like your opinion concerning why that doctor changed his meds like she did. We've covered many cases like David's: Eric Alvarado, Jason Jolkowski, Joshua Guimond, Kaya Taylor, Gayla Shaper, to name just 5. All ones in which people were acting like themselves, then all of the sudden, they're gone. And what do many people think in all of those kinds of disappearances? That foul play occurred. No proof of it, but we come to those conclusions because we dismiss the idea that somebody could go from perfect to far from perfect so fast. Yet David Schroeder shows a person can, under a non-stressful situation, in which all he had to do is pick up Robert, then Devin, then come home. That's it. Something parents probably do several times a week. If it's possible then it's possible anytime. I think understanding this is very important. Maybe one of the most critical topics in studying missing persons cases. Why did people do what they did? All of this is for you to consider. I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.